hello there. I'm making this video significantly later than what I would have normally liked to have gotten it done, so I apologize for my tardiness. Same goes for the other Best of 2022 videos that I plan on releasing in the near future. Still, this tradition of ranking the games that I played in a single year is one that I want to keep from here on out. So, that brings us to where we are today. I'd like to do something different moving forward though.
Change is good.
In 2020, I ranked every game that I played through to the end for the first time that year, since there were a lot. The following year there weren't as many games to talk about, but I had played enough to where I could cobble together a top 10 list of games that I legitimately enjoyed. As for 2022, the list of games that held my interest right up until the end credits was even thinner. I don't buy and play games that I don't expect to turn out well, but even so, there weren't enough that I played to the point that making a top 10 list would make much sense. So, this time, and possibly moving forward, I'm only giving an official ranking for the games that I fully enjoyed. But to satiate the curiosity of those who made it this far in the video, I will at least briefly tell you what other games I've played to various capacities. Let's start first with the games that I completed, but wasn't as enthusiastic about. Batman Arkham Origins had some good elements to it, such as the boss battles and the mostly functional free-flow combat, but open-world gameplay in this one felt much less satisfying than the fully fleshed-out systems present in Arkham City and Knight. Plus, without delving into spoilers, the outcome of this story was just underwhelming to me. All in all, while not a bad game by any stretch, this is the weakest of the Arkham series in my opinion. Boomerang Fu was a multiplayer title that we bought on a whim since we found it on the Nintendo eShop for just a few bucks. I would probably be harder on this if I purchased it for more money, since the significant lack of content and overly simple gameplay can make it feel quite repetitive. But for what it's worth, this offers a cute, fast-paced dose of fun that can keep a family or group of friends entertained for a bit. It just gets old after a while. Halo Infinite just made me sad, man. I hate seeing what was once a mighty pillar of the Xbox brand fall into obscurity and mediocrity. And I'm not specifically talking about the multiplayer here, even though the scalping of features and incredibly messy handling of the multiplayer to be a major detriment. The campaign is really what makes this game feel like an embarrassment to me. The return to familiar settings, enemies, and the classic art style would have been more impactful had not the near-complete disregard for the previous game's story, as bad as it was, ran the narrative into the ground. There were other issues at play, the likes of which I may get into with a video someday, but in short, this was one of the most disappointing games I have ever played. Now I'm gonna piss some people off by saying this, but I really didn't think Star Wars Republic Commando was all that fun or engaging to play. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I was playing on PC and could tweak mouse and keyboard controls, but that wouldn't have saved this from its lack of a compelling narrative and their ridiculously unbalanced difficulty on the hard mode. Those things just made what otherwise could have been an interesting Clone Wars shooter into a dull, monotonous slog. But out of all the games I've mentioned in the video so far, I would say that I probably enjoyed Stray the most. The unique premise of playing as an orange cat maneuvering through a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk environment populated by quirky robots is executed well through the solid controls, immersive visuals, and soothing musical score. It's also undeniably beguiling to just play as the cat. The novelty does eventually wear off, since the gameplay is just too restrictive and linear, even in the semi-open world chapters, for it to really emerge as a noteworthy game. With Stray being something you can beat in a couple of hours, it ends before it really begins. It didn't help that it took 3 playthroughs in order for me to obtain the Platinum Trophy, which caused the already brief adventure to feel progressively more stale. Still, not a regrettable experience at all. Now beyond those games, there were others that I played but were unable to finish. Hopefully I can rectify that this year. I had also replayed Spider-Man Miles Morales around Christmas time in order to get the New Game Plus trophies for the Platinum, and I also did my second playthrough of Breath of the Wild with my wife in tow. Feel free to check out my video essay examining that game from a Christian perspective. It also saddens me that a couple of games just weren't fun enough to sustain my interest. Such was the case for Death's Door and LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I'm happy for those people who were able to enjoy these games to play them to completion, but as for me, I decided to cut my losses and move on to other titles. Thankfully, I don't have to dwell on those lesser experiences too much, because I'm ultimately here to rank the games that that I actually liked among those that I played for the first time. The list may not be long, but I consider all of the following games worthy of a try, whether you're like me and prefer to games to 100% completion, or just experiencing the main story. Let's kick things off with the first entry.
Number 6.
Right at the beginning of January 2022, my wife and I rewatched the Lord of the Rings trilogy. As fulfilling as those movies may be, I still wanted to dwell in Tolkien's world for a while longer. So, I started up Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, which had been sitting on my shelf for about 6 years. While the story honestly left a lot to be desired, the game makes up for its lack of emotional and thematic depth with awesome combat. I particularly loved the wide set of skills that you garner as the undead Ranger Talion, allowing for some great emergent gameplay that works effectively both in stealth and close-quarter situations. If this game was just a playground for killing a bunch of orcs and nothing else, I would have been 100% fine with that. After all, the innovative Nemesis system that allows for AI orcs to remember your actions in the game kept the gameplay loop from ever feeling stale. Does the game feel restricted by the typical tropes of open-world level design? Yeah, sure. It does feel like a big list of geographically based objectives at times, especially since the world feels rather small after a while. But thanks to how fun the basic mechanics were, I kept with it to the very end, earning the Platinum Trophy in the process. You can count on me playing Shadow of War sometime in the future.
Number 5.
At times, Canva Bridge of Spirits feels like a lesser, tamer hodgepodge of the media that it borrows from. You won't get something truly new with this game, but what you will get is something that is absolutely beautiful to play, look at, and listen to nonetheless. First-time development studio Ember Labs really upstaged a significant amount of AAA studios with their work here, given that they not only crafted impressively expansive and lush environments with a relatively small team, but their world was given the polish and flair it needed to stand out from so many other similar games. Thanks to a semi-cartoonish art style for the character designs, especially the cute and cuddly rock creatures, the game will remain timeless even as the technology present in other titles continues to advance. As for the gameplay, the mechanics themselves may not be that particularly deep, but it's the context for the gameplay that helps the experience exist as its own worthwhile thing. After all, you do fight monsters and seek after some collectibles here and there, but the very likable main character, despite looking like a discount Rey from Star Wars, valiantly fights for the cause of restoring balance to nature. Kana's abilities and choices in the hands of the player all stem from this main concept of bringing harmony to a world threatened by the harmful imbalance in its environment. Thanks to an emotionally charged story and a lovely musical score that work in context with the gameplay, the game leaves a lasting impression of wonder that the best kinds of animated films do. Ultimately, Canva Bridge of Spirits proves that it's worth playing due to how its various elements coalesce into a quest of tangible thematic importance. It's basically a PS2-era action platformer like Jak and Daxter with a contemporary vibe. Give this a shot if you want a meaningful interactive adventure that doesn't demand too much of your time.
Number 4.
The Portal games are intrinsic to my identity. A fair number of people who have interacted with me in real life will know that if you dialed my phone number, you'd discover that my ringtone is the simplified version of Still Alive that you hear on the radio in the original game. It may surprise you to hear then that despite how much I love Portal 1 and 2, it wasn't until 2022 that I dabbled in the co-op campaign for Portal 2. My brother-in-law and I decided to go through it almost on a whim, and in the process, we unsurprisingly found the experience to be quite enthralling. In comparison to the main single-player storylines for both games, Portal 2 doesn't offer much in terms of narrative depth for its cooperative component. Thankfully, the quirky tests that Gladys puts her robotic lackeys Peabody and Atlas through are a heaping helping of extremely thoughtful puzzles. Not to mention that there are some helpful mechanics that make the process of communicating with your partner much easier, regardless if they're sitting on the same couch as you or not. It's a great way to develop a stronger cooperative relationship with someone you trust, and the puzzles are manageable enough to where you will be sufficiently challenged but not want to pull your hair out. Either way, with the Portal Companion Collection now being available for the Switch for $20, and with the games pretty much always being cheaper than a gas station soda on Steam, there's no better time to jump into the Portal series.
Number 3.
It bummed me out that I had to mention a couple of Star Wars games earlier in the video that left me feeling dissatisfied. I love this franchise to pieces, so it brings me no pleasure to say that I disliked a Star Wars game. Fortunately, Knights of the Old Republic is not only a fantastic game, but arguably one of the best Star Wars games ever made, if not the absolute best. A lot of that is owed to the story, which is one of the best you can find in Star Wars media, period. No matter the outdated elements that hold KOTOR back, such as the save system, copied and pasted character models, and issues with friendly companion AI, BioWare pulled off creating a narrative in the expanded universe that owes its due getting adapted as a film trilogy or Disney Plus series, if they can do it justice. With this being a Western-styled RPG, its diverse cast of legitimately interesting characters, a compelling plot that encourages players to make morally challenging decisions, and effective world-building that makes each planet feel like a truly lived-in location, I relished the chance to get lost in this long-past era of the Star Wars universe, especially since player agency is a huge part of the experience. Thankfully, it's also a fun game to play in spite of how slowly paced the first few hours on Terrace were. It helps that 2022 marked the first time in which I played an RPG campaign based on D20 with a group of friends, so becoming familiar with those mechanics then made it easier to get immersed into KOTOR and understand its complex foundation. But yeah, developing my skills as a Jedi, and then taking along a couple of companions for some dungeon crawling, specifically HK-47 and Jolie, was really enjoyable. I probably would have preferred a more real-time system like what BioWare implemented into Mass Effect, but the strategic vibe of exploration and sorta turn-based combat made for a good change of pace from other games. The RPG genre has come a long way since this game, but that doesn't make it any less worthy of its long-established reputation.
Number 2.
I've come into this series a bit later than most, since I didn't get a PlayStation until 2015, after the PS4 came around. But I suppose it's appropriate then that the Norse duology in the God of War series serves as both a continuation and soft reboot of the franchise. While I prefer God of War Ragnarok as opposed to its 2018 predecessor, mostly due to how it fixes a lot of minor problems I had with that game, this 1-2 punch of epic action-adventure titles still hits with tremendous force nonetheless. Kratos' adventures have always been about taking down massive, titanic enemies, with the games doing well to convey the scale of what you're doing. The Norse God of War games may have moments like that, but I think of these more as blockbuster stories with a lot of intimate, quiet moments shared between characters, in which the games do benefit from experiencing both together due to how well each narrative complements and completes the other in satisfying ways. I laughed, I cheered, I got emotional, and was altogether fulfilled by my experiences with these games as stories, even with these two being my real frame of reference for God of War. Combat and exploration were also phenomenal as well, with Ragnarok's quality of life changes to the mechanics being especially welcome. There are enough challenges and unique skills to counteract the relatively straightforward loop of dodging and hitting, so much so that it's fun to both take down the average grunt or brawl with the Valkyries. The grinds to obtaining the platinum trophies in both games were lengthy but reasonable, in which they provided a fair amount of rewards for your efforts both in terms of upgrades and expanding the narrative. All in all, I am just in awe that both of these games manage to present adventures on immense scales that somehow also feel deeply personal. It's a no-brainer to play these titles if you own a PS4 or PS5. The RPG, more specifically the Japanese RPG, was always a genre that I kept a considerable amount of distance from. Having played a handful of Pokemon games when I was younger, the need to do extremely repetitive and unchallenging turn-based battles turned me off the idea of that kind of gameplay altogether. However, once I got maybe 5 to 7 hours into my playthrough of Persona 5 Royal, in which me and my ragtag group of misfit teenagers were trying to take down Kamoshida, I thought,
oh, yeah.
Oftentimes my favorite games are the ones that are just the complete package. That doesn't always mean that they have to be large-scale experiences that take up literal months to finish, but they should feel like fulfilling, worthwhile uses of my time. The magic of this game is that because everything is done in little chunks, where you have to accomplish as much as you can within a single calendar day, it's both a huge investment of time in the long term, while also an easy experience to pick up and play in small amounts. This helps the game feel both quaint and and important, which works because there's a great variety of things you can do. You primarily live your life as a high school student in Tokyo, balancing your schoolwork, spending time with friends, working a part-time job, helping people, going to the batting cages, fishing, video games, coffee, going on dates, reading books. Yeah, you get the picture. You can do a lot of stuff in this game. On the other hand, you can do the typical dungeon crawling and turn-based combat you'd come to expect from an RPG, but there are enough changes to the core mechanics of these types of games to where nothing ever gets stale. In fact, I always had a blast with the combat. It's strategic without being overly complex, the visuals are flashy and add a sense of addictive flair to your actions, and honestly, it's just cool. I mean, look at this!
Relied on you so much. That ends today. Hang on!
I don't want to say too much more than that, since I'd like to make a full video on this game at some point. Even so, Persona 5 Royal took about 140 hours for my wife and I to earn the platinum and get to the true ending, and even then, we were sad for it all to be over. We loved spending time with the Phantom Thieves of Hearts and participating in their grand, mind-altering adventure. Rest assured, now that I've played this game to completion, I'm more open to trying other RPGs, whether they be in the Persona series or otherwise. And that's it! Thank you for checking out my thoughts on what my favorite games of 2022 were, at least from those that I had played. Feel free to share in the comments what your favorite games that you played that year were too. If you liked what you saw and would be eager to see more of what I have to offer, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining the notification squadron so that you won't miss out on my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great one.